Welcome back. My final guest is Billy Keenan, a U.S. Army veteran and a motivational speaker. Welcome, Billy.
George, great to be with you.
So, Billy, you've got an incredibly motivational story, and we're gonna scratch just the surface in about 15 minutes on this program today. Obviously, you've experienced a lot of things in your life. You're in our veteran segment, so we want to talk a little bit about your military service, and then obviously we're going to get into a little bit about the rest of your life story and
Right.
your career and where you are now and some of the things you're doing now. But maybe you talk to us a little bit about your upbringing, where you came from, where you were born and raised and went to school.
Born in the Bronx, 1967. Dad got us out of the Bronx in 1970. My dad was NYPD, so he came up here. Grew up in Immaculate Conception Parish, went to Immaculate Conception School, Albertus Magnus, Fordham, and then onward. So that's really, Stony Point was just an incredible place to grow up. It really was like in Rockland County, it was the Wild West.
It still is in a lot of ways. But
yeah.
So you're a transplanted BIC. So Bronx Irish Catholic came up here to you went from a BIC to a RIC, Rockland Irish Catholic.
But we definitely brought the Irish with us.
Yeah.
My dad, it was an accordion player, Irish step dancer, and a singer. So like the music was just ever present in the house.
And we're going to get into that in a little bit because
Yeah.
you're an accomplished musician in your own right. You played 5 instruments, right?
5 instruments, yeah.
And had albums. In fact, my wife has one of your, I think 2 of your albums at home.
Awesome.
That sometimes in WFUV, the Irish music on Sunday mornings, at noon to 4 on Sunday, Killamagale, the Irish program, Music of the Irish. Sometimes when they have like a game on, or something, and it's pushed out, she'll throw on one of your tapes.
Oh, I love it.
And my mother-in-law will sit there and listen. So.
That is great.
But we'll get to that in a little bit. But so Fordham University, you're a 3rd generation Army, right?
That's right. My Irish immigrant grandfather comes here in 1906, takes a job as a farm laborer up in Fort Jervis. So he was waiting for his citizenship. 1917, we entered the Great War. My grandfather puts down his pitchfork, picks up a rifle, goes to France, is dodging bullets in the Meuse Argonne for the last 4 months of the war, comes back home, honorably discharged, full citizenship, comes back to New York, marries, has 10 children,
Wow.
6 boys, 4 girls, 5 out of the 6, my father included, serves in the Army, Navy, or the Marine Corps. And then it comes to my generation, and I was deeply influenced by the speeches and the candidacy of Ronald Reagan. So as a 14-year-old, I was so disillusioned and upset that we couldn't repatriate 53 Americans from our embassy in Tehran and the malaise of the Carter administration. And then Reagan comes along, and all of a sudden, I'm feeling proud to be an American. And my own journey as a kid at Albertus, I was student council president, I was 2nd team all-county in soccer, and I was selected for the American Legion Boys State. None of these things were accolades, they were a calling. And I felt like, you know what, I've got something really to give. We're in a Cold War. Even though it's a Cold War, wars need warriors. And I made my mind up to apply to Fordham for an ROTC scholarship, and it all happened. And 4 years later, graduation night, I was made a 2nd lieutenant.
So tell us just a little bit about that, because I find it fascinating. I mean, a lot of what you're talking about will resonate with so many folks of our generation. I mean, literally, we had the booming times of the '80s, but that was preceded by the defeat in Vietnam, the high inflation, and literally it just seemed like around the world, a lot of America's interests were being supplanted by other powers, and certainly Carter was talking more about how America was going to adapt to become, not the leader that it had been for the previous, 100 years. And Reagan came in and said, no, that's not what it is. And really, there's that whole generation. There's so many folks that resonates with, even to this day. But what was that like for you as ROTC? So, if you can think back, what was that training like? Because it
Right.
prepared you because you're commissioned as an officer then, right?
Right. So you go to school. You're a regular Fordham student Monday to Friday, but every Wednesday you put on your camouflage and your combat boots. You go through your regular classes, and then from 3 to 6 you study military science. One weekend a month you go to Fort Dix or to West Point or to Camp Smith, and you're on a rifle range, or you're doing small unit infantry tactics. Summer, 6 months or 6 weeks rather after sophomore year, I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, lived in barracks with a bunch of other guys who were going to be lieutenants, and then the same after junior year, 6 weeks at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, home of the 82nd Airborne, and then that prepared you for commissioning. So it was a gradual build-up, but it gave you the skills. It gave you the skills to walk through the first door, which was commissioning, and it's a series of, I call it deliberate discomfort, and that's the life that you're signing on for. And even beyond that, I had this moment of recognition right when I was being commissioned that I'm handing my life over to something so much bigger than me, and my selfish wants and needs are going to be subservient to that of the Army. Wherever they want me to go, whenever they want me to go, and whatever they need me to do once I get there. That's what I was signing on for at the age of 21.
And Billy, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. We're going to continue with your military story, but I would say that what you're talking about, giving yourself over to something bigger, is pretty much the story of the rest of your life, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. It just was, I came from a family that valued service. And it really starts with my grandfather and goes to my dad, Army, NYPD, and then to me. And then once I left the Army, I dabbled. I had a brief flirtation with corporate America, and camouflage fit me perfectly, but the business suit never fit. So I had the courage to quit and drop everything, move back in with mom and dad, go to school, get a master's in education, and then the rest was a beautiful history.
Right, absolutely. And we'll get to that in a moment. But let's go just back into your military service. So you served a couple of years, 2.5 years stateside. Where were you?
I was in Fort Lewis, Washington. So I had the option after airborne school to go to the 82nd Fort Bragg, but Fayetteville, North Carolina, compared to the absolute majestic beauty of the Pacific Northwest, there was no competition. So I was 45 minutes south of Seattle, and from there, every weekend. So when you're a bachelor lieutenant, you live off post. So I lived with two helicopter pilots in a house on a lake. We all had cars, convertibles, and we would drive up to Seattle every weekend, and Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA, Hawaii for a week when one of our brother lieutenants got married, and it was just this amazing experience. And I was so blessed. I had one of the most amazing battalion commanders. Spent a year in Vietnam, and he was such a mentor. When the Gulf War came up, our unit, 9th Infantry, was scheduled for deactivation. So, because right after the Cold War, we just didn't need as many infantry divisions, and we got cut. So all of my Fordham buddies from all over the continental United States were getting ready to deploy for Operation Desert Shield. And they're calling me every night, Billy, you going? And here I am, trained for the big game, George, and we're not going. And I was devastated. Went to talk to my battalion commander, and he said, Bill, don't be in any hurry to go to war. Stay with me through deactivation, and anywhere you want to go after that, you can go. And that's how I ended up in Honduras. Right after that, I went to him and said, sir, it's either Korea or Honduras.
So tell us about that, because we were talking off camera earlier. It was very interesting. So you had a very interesting duty down in Honduras. Speak to us about that.
Yeah, our mission there, we were 1,500 soldiers occupying were actually renting space on a Honduran air base, Sotocano Air Base, which is the home of Honduran Special Forces and all their aviation capabilities. And we lived in huts. We lived in wooden huts with corrugated tin roofs and screens for windows, no running water, no plumbing. And we were there for what was called a low-intensity conflict. That was our policy. Low intensity, cold, conflict, war. The Cold War never really ended. We were there to make sure that in our hemisphere, that Marxism, communism, whatever you want to call it, the path that the Sandinistas followed in Nicaragua, we want to make sure that that seed never grew in Honduras, and that's why we were there. But what that meant was going out in the countryside, in the small towns, places that you would never have heard of, like Comiagua, La Ceiba, San Pedro Sula, Tel Aviv. And here I am, a kid from Stony Point, walking around the streets of these places, but doing good for people and seeing it. And also think about the perspective growing up in a totally middle-class environment and then seeing withering poverty in Honduras and coming back home at the end of it all and saying, this country is the greatest, most generous, most open, amazing country that the world has ever seen. And President Reagan was so right to bring that message back to us, that we have to lead. The world needs us to lead. And that's really what that whole experience did for me. But I'll tell you, there were great points of humor. I played on the base soccer team, and every Saturday we would go out in the countryside, and one week we'd play the seminarians, the guys studying for the priesthood, and the next week we'd play the medical students or the police department, and they would absolutely clean our clock. 7-0, 5-0, and we would bring the beer, and the Hondurans would bring the food, and it was just this great coming together. It was beautiful. And on St. Paddy's Day, March 17th, 1992, I actually made military history. I played live Irish music for the first time in the Republic of Honduras.
Let's segue from your military career now into what happens with the rest of your life. And obviously, your life is way beyond a tragic surfing accident, within the past 10 years. Your life encompasses so much more than just that accident. And you've done so much since then, and you have so much more that's to happen. But so let's take it forward. So you leave from the military, you go into the corporate world, eventually you go back to school, St. Thomas Aquinas, get your master's degree in special education, and you embark on a 20-year teaching career. Tell us about that.
Right. Well, my degree was in social studies. I became a history teacher, and when I went back to school, I did two things. I went back to school full time, and I started a band of my own. I was a side man. I was a bass player for another guy's band, but I needed to make more money, so I became the leader of my own band, and we were doing 50 weddings a year, and we were really moving, and it was Irish American music. So I grew up, my dad played accordion, so I started on tin whistle at the age of 8. By 10, I went to flute, and by 11, complete frustration, I needed to sing, so they got me a guitar. At 14, bass, and then when I was in the Army, I picked up piano. And so while I got my first teaching job at Albertus Magnus, my alma mater, and I did all the liturgical music there, and I was teaching history, coaching varsity soccer, coaching freshman basketball, directing the school play, and then doing my master's at night and playing every Friday, Saturday, and a lot of Sundays. When you're young, you're bulletproof. You can do these things, but I absolutely, the passion that I felt, the commitment that I felt as an Army lieutenant, I found that in the classroom. And instead of leading soldiers, I was mentoring young people, 14-year-old and 15-year-old kids. And I just have to tell you, as an aside, George, one of those students, he was a young boy named Matt Coyne, and he used to stay after class and ask me about my life in the military. He went ROTC, became a lieutenant, deployed numerous times over the last 20 years. He just got promoted to lieutenant colonel, and he's a professor of military science at Syracuse. So it's like, you know, I get to see now the effect of what I was doing back then, and that it's really carried through to a lot of young people's lives. And it is, I mean, you could write me a check for $1 million, and I think it would pale by comparison to just that kind of impact.
Oh, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I do a little teaching as well, you know, and it's amazing when you, you know, I've been an adjunct on and off for the last, you know, 20-something years at different colleges in New Jersey, primarily. But, you know, when you connect and you see students struggling and they connect and you're able to kind of help them, you know, maybe it's not even so much the subject matter that you're teaching, but you get them to kind of process something for themselves, and it helps move them forward in their life's arc. That's way more valuable than so many other things. But Bill, you're really a very driven person. So you were a competitive triathlete as well, right?
Yeah. That all happened when I got up to North Rockland. I think my life has been the combination of great luck, but I also think you definitely make your own luck. You put yourself in the right circumstance. So I taught in room 318 at North Rockland. The next door teacher, my friend Brian Diglio, taught in room 317, and our other best friend, Bill Robbins, taught in room 316. In the year 2000, we said, let's do the West Point Triathlon. So we started training together, and we would get together at 6 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the pool deck at the high school, and we would swim a mile before going to teach our classes. And that's how we did it. And we started there, and we built up to the Olympic distance triathlon. And at the time I got hurt, I was training for a half Ironman, and none of it felt like drudgery. It was just something that was so much fun. And when you get to do it with your best friends, it just, we actually stopped competing in around 2008 because we realized we're spending $150 just for a t-shirt. This is idiotic. So it was just for the joy of training and being with your best buddies. And that was, and it prepared me. The work I did as a triathlete had a lot to do with saving my life on the day of my accident because I was so strong.
Well, let's segue into that. Unfortunately, you suffered a spinal cord injury that's obviously dramatically changed your life, but it's changed your life in a way where you've really adapted and you've reached thousands, tens of thousands of people with your inspirational story. So let's talk a little bit about that. So tell us about the accident and what happened.
September 14th of 2013. If you could have, it would be impossible to script a more perfect day. It was the day of the Jersey Shore Irish Festival, and I was slated to go on stage with Celtic Cross at 4 o'clock on the main stage in front of 1,000 people. And the only thing that could make that day better was an hour or two in the surf at Seagirt. And that was a surf break that I had surfed a couple of times before, never had a problem. I had surfed since 2003, so 10 years, never a scratch. And I've taken some savage wipeouts, and like I said, never a scratch. Surfed for an hour, and there was one other surfer in the water. And I turned to him and said, Eric, I'm gonna grab one more wave. And I paddled for that wave, stood up, and I was surfing, and then all of a sudden, I was thrown over the front of my board. If I had fallen off my board in 4 feet of water, I would have walked away. I fell off my board in 2 feet of water and was instantly paralyzed. So that other surfer saw my body float up to the surface face down, knew immediately that I was drowning. Now, this is where, is it coincidence or God incidence? A man named Steve McDonald said there is no coincidence, it's God incidence. That man, Eric, had grown up being a lifeguard, dragged my body onto the beach, started CPR, had his wife call the paramedics. They got there, got me onto the ambulance, and I was what they call unresponsive. No pulse, no breathing. I was clinically dead. They put the AED pads on me. They shocked me once, no response. Shocked me a second time, and they got a faint pulse. And they got me to the hospital. MRI revealed multiple fractures and a contusion, a bruise at C4. What it meant was for the rest of my life, I was going to be much as you see me now, with the further complication that I was likely never going to be able to breathe without the ventilator again. And then they put me into a 2-week medically induced coma, giving me the drug fentanyl. And I woke up 2 weeks later at 3 a.m. and tried to move. And I say, in my writings, I call it the dark night of the soul, when the sum of all of your fears, everything that I've been able to do in this incredibly charmed life before the accident, everything had been taken from me in like a millisecond.
You know, Billy, I'm sure you know this, but September 14th is the day of the accident. So that's actually in the Catholic Church. That's actually the feast of the triumph of the Holy Cross.
Yeah.
So literally your own version of your own crucifixion.
Oh yeah.
You know, in a spiritual sense, and so you're talking a lot about the spirituality that's going to help buoy you, you know, bring you through that. But against all odds, you're able to go back into teaching, right? You're obviously not breathing, you know, on a vent today.
Right.
So you've been able to you know, move forward from that and really become an example for so many folks, inspiration for so many folks. Tell us what it was like returning to teaching, and now your current vocation of what you're really doing as a motivational speaker.
So when I got to Helen Hayes after the Jersey Shore, they predicted that I would never breathe again. And they told my respiratory therapist, do not take him off the vent. And I said, please, take me off the vent. I've got to get back to teaching. And it took 4 months of working in secret, but we did it. And I kicked the ventilator and the trach tube. And then I thought I'd be back to teach at North Rockland in September of 14. But instead, people that were in my life, that are no longer in my life, sent me to a nursing home for 6 months to put me away. But I wouldn't accept it. So I came home, and I got stronger and stronger. And in September 8th of 2015, against all odds, I got on a Rockland Trips bus at 7 a.m. and rolled into North Rockland with the aid of a teaching assistant. I was able to discharge all of my duties as a teacher, and it was literally a coming back to life for me. So much had been taken, and I grabbed that back, and with the help of a teaching assistant to be my fingers on the keyboards, I was able to do everything. And it was a gift that I got for 2 full years, and then my body gave out. So while I was teaching, I went through a brutal divorce, health complications. I had a grand mal seizure in October of 2016 on a Monday night. I woke up the next day, intubated, and wondering what time it was. And that was Tuesday. I went back to work on the Thursday. So I just kept going. And like nothing could stop me. I just kept going. And you know, in my writings, I call it the road to resilience. And it's just grit, determination. And it's something that lies in every single one of us. And part of my mission, my ministry now, is to draw that out of people. But after 2 years, my body finally gave out, and I was no longer able to do the 5 days a week. And I went into a little bit of a depression. And I finally talked myself out of it and said, wait a minute, I've got this amazing story to tell. And it would be an insult to God, who brought me back into this life that I'm living now, to keep it to myself. And so my friends at North Rockland gave me their classrooms, 20 people at a time, and in September of 17, and word of mouth. And then before I knew it, I was at Fordham University talking to their baseball team, and they contacted the United States Military Academy, and I talked to their baseball team, and then St. John's University, Suffern High School, Nanuet, Albertus, North Rockland, and it was this burgeoning practice. And then everywhere I went, people said, Billy, you've got to write the book. I said, yeah, I know. I just got to find the time. And then the pandemic hit, and I had nothing but time. So I went into a little bit of a depression, like the whole world did when the pandemic hit. But I'm a mission-oriented guy. I mean, I'm in this wheelchair, but I'm still a little paratrooper.
Yeah.
And that's why I wear my airborne wings, to remind me of that. So I went on Amazon, and I got a USB mic and a program called Dragon, and it's voice to text. So get this, I dictated a memoir called Miles to Go, The Road to Resilience. I dictated 90,000 words in 4 months, and it goes like this. On Saturday, September 14th, 2013, I went surfing at the Jersey Shore, period, space bar, like it's that tedious. But every day I got up, and that was me going to work for 4 months straight. Finished that and waited and hoped for somehow to find a publisher. Found a publisher for that, and right now that is gone through its second edition. I just got the cover for it, and it's coming.
Oh,
it's coming soon.
That's great. So we're looking forward to being able to read that. I mean, Billy, you've also did a second book on young fiction, right?
I did.
Young adult fiction.
Yeah, and so after I finished The Road to Resilience, again, I didn't have a mission, so I went into a little bit of a funk. And my older brother Jim is a retired cop, and he gave me some tough love. He said, "Hey, come on, get your head in the game, do something creative." And my younger son Keenan, when he was going through the trauma of my injury, he was a baseball player, and he had a terrible freshman season at Albertus. And he was up in his room playing Xbox, and I said, listen, you're not going to do that every day in sophomore year. You're either going to do cross country or you're going to do Falcon Community Service. And he said, all right, I'll run cross country. So I started the story, and I used him as a lens, and I created this character, a 14-year-old freshman named Mickey Ryan, 14-year-old freshman in high school. But 6 months before he entered high school, his father was an Army reservist, and he got activated, and he went to Afghanistan and never made it back. Right before he deployed, he was training for the Lake Placid Ironman, and the son picks up the mantle of the challenge. And the first day of high school, he says to his class, by the end of senior year, 1 month after graduation, I'm going to complete the Lake Placid Ironman. And the story is called I Am Iron Man. And it's a coming-of-age story, takes him through freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year. And it's just, as enthusiastic as I am about the road to resilience, I'm just as enthusiastic about I Am Iron Man, because it's a story that the world needs to hear, that, you know, yes, there's trauma, but there's a way out of it. And this kid finds a positive repository for his grief and his trauma, much the same way that I did with the road to resilience, you know? So I can't wait. I'm chomping at the bit.
A remarkable story, and we're gonna have to get the links to how folks can be able to get these books, you know, when they're coming through. But I wish we had more time. I mean, we could go on for, you know, hours here, but we are over time on this. But Billy, I have to, you know, really thank you for, your willingness to share this story, not just with me, but with our viewers here in Clarkstown. You know, you've had an incredible full life with a lot of ups and a lot of downs. You know, award-winning Irish musician, you know, a paratrooper, you know, a soldier, an educator, a father, you know, you name it, and a competitive triathlete. You can, you know, all of these things. I mean, somebody would have half these experiences. They would have a very full life. And now you're continuing as a motivational speaker and author, and you know, offering that message of resilience. And that's really, you're absolutely right. That's a message we need today. There's so many folks that are just very willing to unfortunately, they get life kicks them in the teeth, and it's very easy for them to just say, "Oh, that's it. You know, I'm never going to go beyond that." But you're somebody that has literally made pivots and changes, and you know, when things have happened, you had to kind of dig down deep and move yourself forward repeatedly. I think it's no accident that, in a spiritual sense, your transformation really takes place on the day when they celebrate the cross, which, when you look at the cross, in a spiritual sense, that's viewed as like a sign of defeat. But in a spiritual sense, people realize, in the Christian perspective, that not only is that not a sign of defeat, it's actually the emblem of victory.
Well, I in my writing of The Road to Resilience, I do write about an allegory. I could never compare myself to my Lord and Savior, but there is an allegory. When I was first injured, I wore a halo. It was screwed into my skull, and that was my crown of thorns. And my crying out on a nightly basis, that was the garden in Gethsemane. And but I'm quick to say I'm not a prophet, Messiah, or even a man of Scripture. I am the guy who would stay up all night drinking beer and singing Irish songs. You know what I mean? So I'm just a very regular guy. But all of these things have happened to me, and yet I'm still here. And I cannot help but believe that there is a really strong force driving me to do what I do. And I feel blessed, George, to be able to do it. And all I want to do is do as much as I can until he says, "You've suffered enough, you know, come and be with me."
Well, Billy, let's end it there. Just absolutely been a fabulous guest, and I want to wish you well as you go forward and as you continue with your speaking and with your writing. Again, just thank you for your willingness to share your story, and thank you for your service to our country.
Oh, every day was a privilege, George. Every day.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.